The Hetzer, the little German tank killer that scared the heck out of Allied tankers. Hey there, folks! Subscribe to our channel for more epic stories about tanks, battles, and the tech that shaped history. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know what you think about the Hetzer. Your feedback fuels our passion for these tales. Picture this, it's 1944, and the Second World War is raging. Smoke fills the air, shells are flying, and the ground shakes from the roar of tanks. In the middle of all this chaos, a small, sneaky machine darts across the battlefield. It's not a massive tiger or a hulking panther. It's the Jagdpanzer 38, better known as the Hetzer, a German self-propelled gun that gave Allied tankers, especially Soviet crews, nightmares. Why? Because this little wasp could sting hard. In this story, we're diving deep into the Hetzer's tale, how it was born, how it fought, and why it became such a legend. We'll keep it simple, pack it with cool details, and sprinkle in some history and economics to make it a whopping 20,000-word epic. Buckle up for a wild ride through the world of this pint-sized tank killer. By 1943, Germany was in deep trouble. The Soviet Union was hitting back hard on the Eastern Front, rolling out tons of T-34 and KV tanks that were giving the German panzer forces a run for their money. The Germans realized their fancy heavy tanks like the Panther and Tiger were too expensive, too slow to build, and a pain to maintain. They needed something cheap, quick, and deadly to turn the tide. Enter the Jagdpanzer 38, nicknamed the Hetzer, which means hunter or hound in German, like a dog chasing down its prey. The name came straight from Hitler himself in December 1944, inspired by the German word Hetz, meaning a hunt with hounds. And boy, was this machine a hunter! It was built on the chassis of a captured Czechoslovak tank called the Panzer 38T, which the Germans got their hands on when they took over Czechoslovakia in 1939. Factories in Prague and Pilsen, run by companies called BMM and Koda, churned these babies out like nobody's business. By the summer of 1944, the Hetzer was rolling into battle, replacing the outdated Marder III, which was basically a sitting duck by that point. What made the Hetzer so special? It was small, low to the ground, and tough to spot. It could hide in bushes, ditches, or behind hills, making it a sneaky predator. Powered by a 160 horsepower engine, it could zip along at up to 48 kilometers per hour, that's about 30 miles an hour, and had a range of 130 to 180 kilometers, roughly 80 to 112 miles. Its main weapon, a 75mm anti-tank gun called the Pak 39er-2, which could punch through 88mm of armor with a standard shell or 97mm with a special armor-piercing round at a kilometer away, about 0.6 of a mile. That meant it could take out most medium tanks of the time, including the Soviet T-34. Plus, it had a machine gun on top, an MG-42. Nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw by Allied troops for its crazy fast firing rate. The best part, the Hetzer was dirt cheap compared to heavy tanks. With Germany's economy crumbling, that was a game changer. They could crank out tons of these machines, keeping their army in the fight even as resources ran low. Let's pop the hood on the Hetzer and see what made it so awesome and where it fell short. First, the good stuff. Its low profile, just over 2 meters tall, about 6.5 feet, made it super hard to spot. Imagine a Sherman or T-34 crew scanning the horizon, and this little guy is tucked away behind a hill, ready to strike. Its front armor was 60mm thick, about 2.5 inches, and sloped at a 60-degree angle, which made it act like much thicker armor. Soviet 85mm guns on T-34s often bounced right off it, especially from a distance. That's a tank crew's worst nightmare. But the Hetzer wasn't perfect. Germany's war economy was stretched thin, and they cut corners on things like optics. The commander's view was pretty bad, and smoke from the gun made it even worse after a few shots. It was like trying to aim through a fog. The heavy gun also weighed down the front of the machine, messing with its suspension and making it a slog to drive through mud or over hills. The engine wasn't always up to the task either, especially on rough terrain. The Hetzer's biggest weak spot: its sides. The side armor was only 20 millimeters thick, less than an inch, which could stop bullets and shrapnel, but not much else. If an enemy caught the Hetzer from the side, it was game over. That's why Hetzer crews loved fighting head-on, using their tough front armor to shrug off hits. Inside, it was cramped. The four-man crew commander, gunner, loader, and driver had to squeeze into a tight space, which made quick reactions tricky. Still, when used right, this little beast was a force to be reckoned with. The Hetzer saw its first action in August 1944, rolling out with German panzer divisions and elite SS units. One of its first big fights was in Latvia against the Soviet Second Baltic Front. The Hetzer's game plan was simple but deadly: hide, shoot, and scoot. It would lurk in a concealed position, fire a precise shot, and then zip away before the enemy could figure out where it was. This hit-and-run tactic was a nightmare for Allied tankers. Soviet crews would lose 2 or 3 tanks before they even spotted the Hetzer's low silhouette. Why was it so scary? Imagine you're in a T-34, rolling through a field. Out of nowhere, a shell hits, and one of your buddy's tanks is toast. You look around, but there's nothing, just smoke and grass. Another shot, another tank gone. By the time you spot the Hetzer, it's already moving to a new hiding spot. Soviet veterans later said, those little coffins were everywhere, but good luck hitting them. The Hetzer earned nicknames like Wasp for its sting, Chisel for its armor-piercing punch, and even Clown for how it seemed to pop up out of nowhere. By 1945, Germany was desperate. They started throwing Hetzers into desperation battalions manned by whoever they could find: sailors, wounded soldiers, even civilians. Yet, even these rookie crews could do damage if they played it smart. The Czechs kept building Hetzers right up to April 1945, even as American bombers pounded their factories. In total, they made about 2,600 Hetzers, plus 20 Flamethrower versions called Flampanzer 38. Which saw action in places like Lake Balaton and the Ardennes. To really get why the Hetzer mattered, let's talk about Germany's economy during the war. By 1943, the Third Reich was running on fumes. Steel, fuel, and manpower were scarce. Building a Tiger tank cost about 250,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $1 million to $100,000 in today's money, adjusted for inflation, and took forever. The Hetzer. It cost around 50,000 Reichsmarks, about $240,000 today, and could be built much faster, thanks to the ready-made Panzer 38T chassis. The Czech factories were a gold mine for Germany. When they took over Czechoslovakia, they got access to top-notch facilities and skilled workers. Koda and BMM were pumping out Hetzers at an insane rate, up to 500 a month in early 1945. Even with bombs falling. But why were the Czechs working so hard for the Germans? It's complicated. Some workers were under pressure, knowing resistance could mean death. Others saw it as a way to keep their jobs and factories running. It's a tough topic, but it shows how war forces people into impossible choices. Economically, the Hetzer was a lifeline for Germany. It let them keep fighting without burning to resources they didn't have. But it was a band-aid on a sinking ship. By 1945, no amount of Hetzers could stop the Allied juggernaut. So, why did the Hetzer freak out Soviet tankers and American ones too? First, its ambush tactics were killer. On the Eastern Front, in places like East Prussia, Pomerania, and Poland, the Hetzer thrived in defensive battles. It would hide in woods or behind hills, fire a shot, and vanish. Its low profile and speed made it a ghost on the battlefield. Second, that front armor was a beast. The 60mm sloped plate could deflect shots from T-34's 85mm guns, especially at longer ranges. American Shermans, with their weaker 75mm guns, didn't stand a chance head-on. This meant Hetzer crews could pick off enemies while staying safe. Third, it was everywhere. Germany built thousands of these things, and they popped up all over the place. Even when manned by untrained crews, a well-placed Hetzer could ruin your day. Soviet tankers described the frustration of losing tanks to an enemy they couldn't see. The Hetzer's ability to strike and disappear created a sense of dread, making every bush or ditch a potential threat. Here's a cool twist. While the Germans were building the Hetzer, the Soviets were working on their own light tank killer, the Su-50-7-B. It was similar to the Hetzer, small, fast, and armed with a punchy gun. Tests showed it could outperform the Hetzer in some ways, but it never went into full production. Why? The Soviets were focused on churning out T-34s and heavies to tanks, which were better for their offensive strategy. The Hetzer, on the other hand, was perfect for Germany's defensive needs in 1944 and 1945. If the Su-57B had hit the battlefield, it might have given the Hetzer a run for its money. But by then, the Red Army was steamrolling forward, and they didn't need a specialized tank killer as much as Germany did. The Hetzer didn't just fade away after 1945. Czechoslovakia kept building them under the name Street 1 and Street 3, producing about 318 more from 1946 to 1951. Some were sold to Switzerland, where they served as the G-13 until 1972. Pretty impressive for a wartime design. The Swiss loved the Hetzer's simplicity and upgraded it with better engines and optics. Germany didn't share many Hetzers with their allies during the war. Only about 70 went to Hungary, where they fought and mostly got destroyed defending Budapest against the Red Army. The Hetzer's legacy lived on, though, as a symbol of what you can do with limited resources and a lot of ingenuity. Tank experts today call the Hetzer one of the best anti-tank vehicles of the Second World War. It wasn't perfect, but it was exactly what Germany needed: cheap, effective, and mass-produced. Some historians say that if the Hetzer had shown up a year earlier, it might have changed the course of the tank war. Its hit-and-run tactics and tough front armor made it a terror, proving that you don't need a giant tank to make a big impact. The Hetzer's story is about more than just a machine. It's about how desperation, creativity, and strategy can come together to create something unforgettable. For Allied tankers, it was a tiny terror that kept them on edge. For us today, it's a reminder that sometimes the underdog can pack the biggest punch. The Hetzer's tale is a wild one, a story of a little machine that took on giants and left a mark on history. It wasn't flawless, but it was clever, tough, and just what Germany needed in its darkest hour. For Soviet and American tankers, it was a reminder that danger can come from the smallest packages. Loved this deep dive into the Hetzer? Subscribe to our channel for more stories about the tanks, battles, and heroes of the Second World War. Drop a comment below, tell us what you think about the Hetzer, or share any family stories from the war. Your thoughts keep this history alive, so let's keep the conversation going.